Welcome, everyone. Today we're jumping into something fascinating, something that really pulls the strings behind the scenes in our brains.
Yeah.
Dopamine. You've probably heard about it, right? Often it gets tied to pleasure, maybe addiction. But it's so much more complex than that. This chemical messenger, it's crucial. It's involved in, well, almost everything: reward, motivation, memory, attention, even just basic body movements. And yeah, when you get a big release of dopamine, it does create that feeling of pleasure, of reward. And that makes sense. It motivates us to repeat whatever caused it. But the flip side is important too. If your levels are consistently low, you might feel kind of flat, less motivated, maybe less enthusiastic about things.
Yeah, and what's really fascinating, I think, is that dopamine isn't just about chasing those quick pleasure hits. It's much more fundamental. Some researchers call it the universal currency of foraging and seeking, which is a cool way to put it. Think of it like your brain's guide telling you what's, worth doing. It drives us to seek out essentials: food, water, shelter, even, importantly, social connection. It's really about sustained effort and aiming for goals, not just that immediate buzz.
That's a really key distinction. So today we're looking at how we can maybe naturally influence this system, right? For better focus, more drive, just better well-being overall. And you might be surprised, but one really potent way our sources point to involves getting cold, like really cold. So let's peel back the layers on this. Okay, so how does dopamine actually work day to day? It's not just like a light switch, on or off. Our sources talk about two main modes. There's this kind of constant low-level background hum. That's the tonic release. Think of it as your baseline readiness, your general motivation level. But then you have the peaks, the phasic release. These are the surges you get when something rewarding happens. Finish a project, eat something delicious, get a compliment. Now here's something that really clicks for me. The satisfaction you actually feel isn't just about how high that peak goes. It's about how high it is compared to your baseline. So if your baseline is already super high, or maybe you're constantly getting small peaks from, say, checking your phone all the time, a new rewarding thing might not feel as good as you'd expect. It's like the contrast is lost.
Exactly. And that leads us straight into this kind of dopamine paradox, especially when we think about problematic behaviors, addiction, things that cause really high, really fast dopamine spikes. Certain drugs are the obvious example. They cause this huge peak, yes, but then there's a crash. And crucially, the dopamine level drops below your original baseline. You end up in this deeper, longer trough, and that makes it incredibly hard to feel motivated by normal, everyday things. Life just feels flat. This can drive what they call a progressive narrowing of what brings pleasure. Basically, fewer and fewer things feel rewarding, which, pushes someone further towards depending on that one thing that can still provide that lift. And it's really important to remember these changes in the brain from substance abuse, they can last a long, long time, even after someone stops using. So that brings up this whole idea of a dopamine detox, right? You hear about people cutting out social media or screens to reset. Now, taking a break from constant stimulation, yeah, it probably can make simpler things feel more rewarding later. Like eating a simple piece of fruit after avoiding processed sugar for a week. It tastes amazing. But scientists are pretty clear it's not a literal dopamine reset happening physiologically. Real lasting change in habits and how your brain responds, that needs sustained new learning, building different pathways, and a word of caution. Trying to deliberately deplete your dopamine through, extreme diets or unproven supplements, that can actually be dangerous, definitely not recommended. And think about this modern habit layering dopamine sources.
Layering. What do you mean by that?
Like listening to your absolute favorite high energy music while you're doing a hard workout,
Right.
or, scrolling Instagram while you're watching a movie.
Okay. Stacking the good feelings.
Exactly. But the sources suggest this can actually backfire long term. It kind of trains your brain to need all those extra things just to feel pleasure from the main activity. It makes it harder to just enjoy the workout or just enjoy the movie on its own. It raises the bar for what feels good.
That makes a lot of sense. So if layering and chasing huge peaks can be counterproductive, how do we support healthy dopamine in a sustainable way? Okay, this is where it gets really interesting. And maybe a bit. Bracing. The cold water thing. Our sources dive into this, and the findings are pretty remarkable. So picture immersing yourself in cold water, say around 14 degrees Celsius, which is like mid-50s Fahrenheit, pretty chilly. Instantly, you get this huge surge of adrenaline, epinephrine, norepinephrine. That's that alert, maybe slightly panicky feeling at first. Wakes you right up. But here's the kicker. Your dopamine levels also start to climb. Not as fast as the adrenaline, but they climb steadily. And they can reach levels up to 250%, 2.5 times above your normal baseline. That's a massive increase, comparable apparently to levels seen with things like cocaine, but obviously through a very different mechanism. And crucially, this dopamine boost doesn't just vanish. It's sustained for a good while, potentially to 3 hours after you get out of the cold water.
Wow. Yeah, that sustained part is key, isn't it? It's such a contrast to those artificial peaks we talked about, the ones that lead to a crash. Cold water seems to elevate the baseline level of dopamine for a significant period. And that leads to the state people often describe like an alert calm. Focused, energized, but not jittery. Which sounds incredibly useful for, well, almost anything. Deep work, complex problem solving, even just being more present in conversations or, performing better athletically.
An alert calm. I like that description.
Yeah. But of course, safety first, right? You don't just jump into freezing water unprepared. Start gradually. Maybe colder showers, shorter durations. Build up tolerance. Listen to your body. Avoid hypothermia. That's really important.
Absolutely. Good advice. Okay, so cold plunges are powerful, but maybe not for everyone every day. What about other, maybe more accessible ways to support that healthy dopamine baseline? Things we can weave into our daily routines. Our sources list quite a few evidence-based habits. First one, no surprise, quality sleep. It sounds basic, but it's fundamental. Sleep is literally when your brain cleans house and, importantly, restores its dopamine reserves. Non-negotiable, really. Then there's something called non-sleep deep rest, or NSDR. Yoga Nidra is a popular form of this. These specific guided relaxation practices apparently can boost dopamine reserves by up to 65%. That's pretty significant.
And that's distinct from just standard meditation, right? Though meditation has its own benefits for focus.
Exactly.
Yeah.
NSDR seems more targeted at that deep rest state that impacts dopamine. Another one, morning sunlight. Get outside early in the day, even 5 or 10 minutes on a sunny day, maybe longer if it's overcast. That light exposure helps boost dopamine and also cortisol, which you actually want earlier in the day to set your body clock. It improves mood, alertness all day long. Simple, but powerful. And of course, regular exercise. Moving your body consistently doesn't have to be marathon running, just consistent movement helps maintain that elevated baseline dopamine.
Right. It keeps the whole system tuned up.
And then there's nutrition. This is a big one. Eating enough protein is key because protein provides tyrosine and phenylalanine. These are the amino acids your brain literally uses as building blocks to make dopamine. No building blocks, no dopamine.
Makes sense. You need the raw materials.
Totally. The sources also mentioned maybe reducing high saturated fat intake and focusing on probiotics. That whole gut-brain connection is increasingly important for neurochemistry. So think nuts, berries, leafy greens, fish rich in omega-3s, good brain food. Oh, and a fun one, music. Just listening to music you enjoy reliably stimulates dopamine. And finally, something really interesting, social connection. Good quality time with people you care about releases oxytocin, the bonding hormone. And it turns out oxytocin directly stimulates dopamine pathways. So connection literally feels good and motivates us to seek more of it.
That social connection piece is fascinating. And maybe just a quick word on caffeine. Its direct effect on dopamine levels is actually pretty modest, surprisingly. It's not like the cold water effect. But what regular caffeine consumption can do is upregulate your dopamine receptors.
Upregulate.
It makes the receptors you have more sensitive or perhaps increases their number. So the dopamine that is released has a bigger impact. You get more bang for your buck, essentially.
Ah, interesting. So it makes your existing dopamine work better.
Sort of, yeah. And just a side note, some studies on yerba mate, which is a source of caffeine, suggest it might even have some neuroprotective effects specifically for dopamine neurons, which is kind of cool. Still needs more research, but interesting.
Wow. It really is amazing how these daily choices, things that seem small, can directly shape our brain chemistry, which brings us back to neuroplasticity, right? This idea that our brain isn't fixed. It's constantly changing, adapting, rewiring itself based on what we do, what we experience. You really can kind of build the brain you want. It takes effort, consistency, but it's possible.
Absolutely. And that's the crucial point. The most powerful driver for changing your brain for that neuroplasticity is your behavior. There isn't some magic pill for neuroplasticity. You have to actually do the work. In fact, research suggests that embracing difficulty, even struggling a bit during learning or practice, can lead to more learning and more structural change in the brain. It's like the effort itself is the signal for the brain to adapt.
So leaning into the challenge is actually beneficial.
Exactly, which ties into the growth mindset idea. Cultivating the ability to find satisfaction, maybe even a dopamine hit, from the effort itself, from the process of learning and striving, not just waiting for the final reward. Because if you rely too much on external rewards after you do something difficult, like I'll only do this hard task if I get a big treat afterwards, it can actually undermine your intrinsic motivation. Your brain starts associating the activity with the treat, not with the inherent satisfaction of doing it.
That makes sense. You shift the focus.
Precisely. So here's a practical tool people can try, using intermittent reward schedules. Think about gambling. It's addictive partly because the reward is unpredictable. You never know when you'll win. You can apply this to your own habits. Like, say you enjoy listening to music during exercise, which we know boosts dopamine. Instead of doing it every time, maybe flip a coin beforehand. Heads, you listen to music. Tails, you don't.
Yeah, really?
Yeah.
Just randomly?
Yeah, that unpredictability can actually keep the activity more engaging over the long haul. It prevents your dopamine system from getting too accustomed to needing that extra boost every single time. Keeps it fresh. Ultimately, though, there's no single perfect strategy for everyone. We all have slightly different brain wiring. So personalization is key. Understanding these principles lets you experiment and figure out what combination of these things works best for your focus, your motivation, your well-being.
That's really empowering. Understanding dopamine isn't just academic. It gives us concrete ways to make conscious choices that support our motivation, our clarity, our overall sense of feeling good and engaged with life. It feels like we can be more active participants in shaping our own internal state.
Exactly. And maybe a final thought to leave people with. If dopamine is fundamentally the molecule of wanting, of seeking, of moving towards goals, how might we consciously direct that powerful innate drive, not just towards external rewards or achievements, the usual stuff we chase, but towards the internal processes, towards embracing effort, towards growth, towards building resilience, towards the very act of shaping our own brains for the better? In this sort of age of indulgence we live in, how could shifting our focus towards rewarding the effort itself fundamentally change our relationship with challenge and, ultimately, with satisfaction?
Wow. That's a deep question to ponder.
Yeah.
A fantastic place to wrap up. Thank you so much for joining us and sharing all these insights, and thank you all for listening. We hope this gives you some food for thought and maybe even inspires you to try, well, maybe not an ice bath tomorrow, but some of these powerful tools